Hi, welcome to episode 1 of The Story Behind the Song, wherein I'm going to take you on a journey that a song goes through from the point where it's just an idea to the point where it's a finished product, if you will. And we're going to start you off with the title track from the album Bridge Across the Years. And since it's the longest song on the album with 3 distinct sections, I'm going to break this video into 2 parts. Because we're going to be covering off the compositional journey, but also the studio journey, all the things that changed once we went into the studio, and things like, how did I get Amanda Lehmann to sing on the album? But to start you off, I've got to take you back 50 years. The year is 1973. I'm in high school in Plymouth, England. And on the weekends, me and 2 buddies would get together and we would jam. We basically take 2 or 3 songs and just flog them to death, because that was the extent of our capabilities. And one of the favorites was the old Neil Young song, Down by the River. Like 2 songs, and we would just play it over and over and over. That is, of course, until Pink Floyd released Dark Side of the Moon, at which point we trashed Down by the River and started jamming on Breathe. Yes, it was a much less litigious era back then. But one of the things we would do is we would just experiment with different ways of playing the same chord, because we were playing them over and over. And going back actually into the 60s, I know exactly where it came from. I started to develop a real interest in chords that had a drone note, like where there's 1 or more strings that ring open no matter where you move your hand on the neck. And that started with a song some of you may remember from Thunderclap Newman called Something in the Air. And it was... Basically, he's going from an E chord to what looks a lot like an F sharp minor, but he or whoever's playing it lifts their finger up so the E continues to ring open instead of being barred, and same with these bottom 2 strings. And I just love the sound of those open strings ringing as the hand moved. And a certain Mr. Lifeson has basically made a career out of playing those types of chords. I mean, if you take the F sharp major, that's what it would normally sound like, but in the hands of young Alex, he would lift the finger off these 2 strings, let those 2 strings open, and you'd get, actually it sounds better on a 12 string. And that basically became known as the Alex Lifeson chord. But anyway, I've always thoroughly enjoyed those open voicings. So anyway, one day we're jamming, and the drummer's younger brother was messing about with the A chord, and he decided to do a hybrid between playing it here and playing it here. So he left the open A from here, but he took the octave A from the G string and moved it up to the D string. Now, if you play the A here, you now have a G string ringing open. As a chord, doesn't do anything for me. But when you start picking it, a really cool thing happens, because when you're picking it down here, it sounds like, the opening of a country and western song. But when you pick it up here, it's a completely different sound, and again, has that drone feel to it, which is just stuck in my head. That's basically as far as we went with it at the time. But as the years progressed, if I got my hands on an acoustic guitar, I would quite often find myself just messing about with that little sequence, and I started adding more notes to it, just messing about. Just messing around. Never thought of it as a song. I just thought it was a cool bunch of notes. But we're probably now well into the 80s. I was messing around with, again, a drone note on a D chord. if you play it up here, that's what it sounds like. But if you move these fingers down to here, but leave the D string open, you get, which I always thought was a really cool sound. And then I thought, well, what if we lift this finger off and we play it like this? And then up to here. And again, another sequence of notes that just stuck in my head. So one day I'm messing about, just doing the, and just building it and building it. And in my head, I'm hearing strings coming in. I'm hearing finally drums and bass kicking in. And I get to the point where it just, sort of wind it down, and something said, okay, this is not the end, it's going to be something after that. And just out of the air, I pulled that experiment I'd be doing with this and just added that in there. And it's a sequence of events, how, you know, the old one thing leads to another, you know. Sorry, couldn't resist. And I just started building on that part, and it was just following where the notes led me, essentially. As it progressed, I thought, okay, let's go from the D up to the G, and I just imagined a mandolin coming in there. Not owning a mandolin at the time, I just started trying to do my best to mimic a mandolin. And back to the kind of open string sound there. So it was just a sequence of random experiments, literally over a period of decades. Like I never took the song seriously. It was just a cool progression of notes. And when I was playing the, I again had the question, okay, now what, where do we go from here? And well, up to here, it had all been imagined on an acoustic guitar. I then heard it going to an electric guitar, you know. And being a big fan of Wishbone and Ash, I thought, what would it be like if we threw a harmony part in there, which I can't do two at the same time properly here, but which we'll cover off that section of song in the next video. But that was sort of the basis of having the guitar parts to the song. And I say song, I still hadn't really thought of it as a song. I thought it was just an interesting sequence of notes. When I made the decision to go into the studio to actually record the album, I had a list of songs to go through, and this was one of the songs I was considering. And at this point, I had no idea on what the song was going to be about. In fact, I even considered doing it as an instrumental. I had no concept of topic for lyrics, let alone any lyrics written. And once I made the decision that this was going to be a song on the album, then it became a question of looking at what I call the architecture of a song. That's where you have to figure out, like, how long are the sections going to be, what instrumentation is going to be used. One of the first things I did was change from the 6th string to the just much more of a jangly sound. And the first person I reached out to was Mark Gladstone on keyboards. He had done a great job on the first two songs we recorded, I Draw the Line and Turn the Cards. And I reached out to Mark and said, so are you up for doing another song? And with the first two songs, I at least had the demo tapes that I had recorded 40 years earlier, so he could at least hear the basic idea of what I was working on. But for this one, it was a blank slate. Like, I had nothing to offer him in terms of where to go. I just said, you know, it starts off with an acoustic guitar going, and I imagine like a string pad coming in low level underneath that, and then some kind of a melody, an ethereal kind of melody on keyboards. No idea in my head what it was going to sound like. So I give this extremely vague direction to Mark, and a few days later, he sends me these files and says, well, here's a starting point. What do you think? And like, I was stunned. I mean, what you hear on a record is basically his first draft. It's, the string pad he came up with was exactly what I had in mind, but the melody that he weaves through it was so well done. And so now it's like, I was getting excited because like I was finally hearing on the speakers what I've been hearing in my head for literally decades. So the song is basically just building that progression and adding more notes. And I thought, okay, there needs to be more to it than that. And I just started messing about. I had earlier, as you've seen, gone from the... So I thought, well, what if I take these parts and just slide the fingers up a couple notes? And I really like the sound of that, so I started doing progression. And it's like, okay, there needs to be something beyond that. So I am not a music theory guy by any stretch. Mark will confirm that. I am very much hunt and peck. Like I just move my fingers to different places and see if it sounds good or not. So I took the... I thought, no, that doesn't work. How about here? Oh, that's kind of cool. And then I just flipped my fingers around. I just loved that sound. So I then started coming down the scale. So that's how that section came about. It was just random experimenting. And talk about serendipities, because at this point I was still considering the song being an instrumental. And once I had that middle section in place, I thought, you know what would sound really cool? A really ethereal female vocal part over the top of that. So for the first time, I actually started thinking of having vocals and lyrics on the song. And it was just an idea that was rattling around inside my head. And it was within a couple of days, I was just scrolling through Facebook, and someone had posted a video of the Steve Hackett band playing in Germany. And the song they were playing was Shadow of the Hierophant, which is one of my all-time favorites from Steve. It's a lovely song. So I'm watching this video, and when Amanda steps up to the mic, she'd been part of the touring band for years. When she stepped up and started singing, I almost fell off my chair. It's like, that's the voice, that's the one I want. So I reached out to her, and this is in October of 2022, and she graciously got back to me fairly quickly, and so we had a quick conversation. I explained what I had in mind. I sent her the 2 finished songs so she could hear what I had been doing, and I think I sent her a rough demo of this song. And she said she was up for working with me on it, but she was just booked solid for the rest of the year and wouldn't have any openings until January. So I thought, okay, we probably won't have this finished in the studio until late December, so that'll work fine. And of course, as things progress, we weren't ready by December, and we weren't ready in January. We were still getting the instrument tracks recorded. We had a number of setbacks along the way. And when it came time to... Well, we were running to a crunch because we're heading to the spring now, and Amanda was getting ready to head off on tour again with Steve Hackett Band. So if we were going to use her, we needed to get her parts done fairly quickly. And I still hadn't written lyrics. So it forced me to really start thinking about, like, what's this song going to be about? And I imagine it as a very reflective song. I mean, here's me, 67 years old at the time, recording my first album, and I just started looking back over my life, over my influences, and I started imagining what would it be like for me to meet myself as a young child. If I could go back in time and meet young Michael, what were my dreams and aspirations back then? What would it be like to have a conversation with your own personal self as a young child? I mean, what a fascinating idea. So that started influencing the thoughts that were in my head in terms of lyrics. And what I did was I just started jotting down phrases. I wasn't able to string any actual lyrics together. I just started jotting down phrases like "look into the eyes of innocence." What would you say to the child? Just jotting down random phrases, and I sent them off to Amanda and said, "Okay, this is not the lyrics. These are just random phrases, but right now we don't even have a melody line for the vocal part. So why don't you just use these random phrases and start working on the melody lines, because we were running to a time deadline." And so Amanda basically took my random phrases, moved them into a slightly different order than the order I sent them, and just used them to experiment with melody lines. And then she sends me this file. And I had this experience so many times with the other people I worked with, where they'd send me a first draft and it'd be like, oh my God, perfection. So we made a couple of subtle changes to lyrics, but that middle section where she first comes in is very close to the first draft that she sent me. The melody line is 100% her coming up with the melody, and also the harmony bits she put in. So now I'm having to write lyrics for the front half of the song for Diego, and I'm starting to think, it's going to kind of be weird if we have Diego in the front part, Amanda in the middle, and then just Diego in the back. I started thinking, what would it be like if after that middle break, if we bring Amanda and Diego in and they can start interplaying with each other? And this is one of the favorite parts of the song for me. It's where you hear their two vocals interplaying, and they both did such an amazing job. I mean, the power and emotion that Diego puts into his vocals is quite remarkable, to go from like full voice to just barely a whisper. And the way Amanda created her parts, I mean, there's multiple parts in there. She does harmony parts to Diego's vocal. She does backing vocal parts with harmonies to the main vocal line. And there's times where she's doing harmonies with Diego and backing vocals, and the backing vocals change each time. Like the vocal design work that she did on that section was stunning. And I love how at the very end, that last line, Diego is just singing full voice, and on the same breath, he just starts to dial it down, and he ends on almost like a whisper. You can barely hear him. And it was just such a masterful use of his voice on that line there. And what Amanda did was she followed the harmony until the very end, and then she dropped out. So that last little bit where Diego's down to almost a whisper, it was just solitary all by itself. And I am blessed to be able to work with people like this who just had that intuitive ability. And my goal basically was to find the best people I could to work with, and then stay the hell out of their way and let them do their thing and give them free rein to come up with what they thought was best. And just such amazing jobs. So after that descent, the question now was, how do we go back to and I felt there had to be some kind of transition. So again, messing around with just moving fingers up and down the neck, I went from, and then went down to, and again, that just jumped out at me as being, yeah, that's the one, that's where we finish. And that's also where I got the idea for bringing the timpani, because I wanted to bring drums and bass in at some point, and I thought that gave the opportunity to have like a build up. So we introduced the timpani on there to just to build up, and then boom, boom, crack with the drums and bass kicking in.